Good morning, all. Welcome to our MS4 information session. We had to shift a little bit today with the weather, so thank you so much for being flexible and joining us virtually today. I say that because we've shifted our title as well. So it's an information session today. We hope to have a separate event when the weather is more cooperative for all of us to be listening and learning from each other. So keep your eyes open for an email about a future event that is more structured for listening to questions from each other. We're really looking forward to today so that we can hear from an expert, Beth Euler with the Center for Watershed Protection, and we get to hear from you all as best we can in our virtual setting today. So a quick overview of today's agenda. What we're going to start off with is an overview of today's goals, and those include a list of questions and comments that can serve as a draft for some public comments that we intend to submit on behalf of Lancaster, on behalf of the collaborative network doing clean water work here in Lancaster. So that's going to look like things that you may put in the chat today. That's going to look like questions you may ask at the times we have set aside during today's presentation. But we're going to have a collection of those questions and comments to submit. Right now, the MS4 permit is open for public comment. That closes on March 19th. We completely understand and hope that you submit your own questions and comments as well. But one of the reasons that we wanted to have today's session was to have a place where everyone can be together to hear those questions, get a little bit more detail, get a better understanding of what is available now and what places we can push to make changes where we think that might be helpful. And so the other goal for today is more clarity than when you arrived. So that might be about a specific document, that may be about some of the language, that may be about how to use some of these documents. So really excited for today because there's going to be some experts that you can connect with, both as our presenters and some other people that are on today's session. So those are our goals for today. The basic breakdown of how this is going to work is we're going to go over some of the basics of today's agenda. And it is recorded, so a reminder that today's recording will be available, but that the people who are presenting today, we are here as single people who have been through some of the details here. It's still very new. Beth, I'll let you give some of the disclaimer about that information as well, but we are not lawyers, we are not DEP, we are just trying to translate some of this information so that everybody's a little better prepared with what information we have. The MS4 really is a tool for getting us closer to that common goal of clean and clear water by 2040. So this is one of the places that as the collaborative network, we want to give you some of that background information, but also be a place that we can ask questions and try to better understand. So we'll do a little bit of that intro. I'm going to turn it over to Beth at that point, and she's going to outline what the chunks of content are. And in between each of those chunks of content, there will be a time for question and answer. So I encourage you to keep your mute on when she's presenting and then come off mute or turn your video camera on when it is time for that Q&A. We'll make sure there's plenty of time for that between each chunk of content. And then by the end of that, we'll be able to wrap up as a group. We will definitely be done by 10:30, and we'll have a chance for you to kind of go back and forth, encourage you to submit more questions or some ideas that may have come to mind between now and then. I will say that I'd like to have someone or maybe a small group of people that are part of the Stormwater Action Team who want to continue researching this. There's a number of you who have been on the state work group. There's a number of you who have been diving into these documents, but would love to have anybody who's interested in helping to collate those questions and maybe refine some of the language so that we're putting our best foot forward with how we can make some recommendations. And then finally, we will make sure that you know about some of the other tools, other events, other ways that you can stay engaged with this collaborative network. So with that in mind, I am going to do one piece of intro here because I want to understand kind of where many of you are coming from today. And in order to do that, I'm going to ask you to pull out your phone, or you can click on menti.com and type in the code that you see. So there's a QR code on your screen. Oops, excuse me. I need to drag that. Can't read the questions. Maybe. So you can go to menti.com and you can type in a code. And the code should be showing there on the top of the screen for you. The code is at the top of the screen. I'm curious, this can be a really stressful topic. It can be a place that people are cautious, are nervous. And so when you type in that code, you can answer some of these questions and we'll be able to hear from each other. The question right now is, where are you on the stress curve? I hope that today's ice and weather have not put too much additional stress on you, but I also know many of you are pulling double duty in your roles within your municipalities or within your organization. Well, it looks like it's not too bad this morning. I hope that you're enjoying your coffee and ready to enjoy some new information, some clarity about today's topic. One other question that I want to check in with everyone is this one about what are the questions, what are the topics that you're most curious about? So there's a few different options on the screen. Some of those things that we're curious about that I'm curious to know if you're curious about is, will my credits from the current requirement be applied to the next permit? Are ag practices still eligible? Do the federal funding pauses impact this? With the shift to volume, which BMPs might be the best fit? And we know that environmental justice areas are called out in the language from DEP. So are you curious if your municipality has one? And finally, an option just for today, I know there's lots of other things we can be curious about, is, does my municipality qualify for a waiver? So just a few samples. And Beth, this might help guide if there's a chunk of today's that we need to spend a little more time on. And it looks like that question about credits, being able to apply to the next permit, is the front runner in today's poll. Well, thank you for participating today. I keep going if you can, or if you have other people that you have with you, their feedback is also helpful. So one last question for today: is there anything that you need help with, or that you're feeling really blocked by? This is where you can type in a question. Same code, same survey. This is just a place to get us started, and it will be open and available throughout the presentation. So if there's something that you want to type in here, that would work fine. Getting a couple pieces of feedback here. That's great. I hope that stress piece before wasn't the only thing pushing you towards your answers here, but having today's session, yeah, that'll add some clarity, some more time to take it all in, definitely. There's a lot going on, and this is one piece on many people's plates, but know that you are not alone, that there are many people also trying to understand. Yeah, how we can combine some of these things. I hope that with the different listening sessions, with the different ways to engage, we'll be able to bring some pieces together. Act 167, MS4, source water protection, PFAS is coming up more and more. So I know that there's some overlapping content areas for many of you in today's stormwater and drinking water worlds. Yeah, good questions about layers for impervious or how much funding we can do here. Yep. Good questions, good topics that we want to make sure that we come back to as we can. Well, thanks everybody. Like I said, these will be open. I welcome and encourage you to continue participating in this Menti. It gives us a better understanding of where can we be most helpful? Where can the Lancaster Clean Water Partners and the entire countywide action plan team continue to provide direction, experts, and then bring kind of the right kinds of resources to that. So Beth, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can.
Okay.
We are recording today, just one last reminder to everybody. And with that, we're going to move into a section about what we know. So those were some good questions about things that might be blocking you, but we do know a lot of information that Beth is going to share with us today. So really excited to have Beth Euler from the Center for Watershed Protection. And Beth, if you don't mind just giving a little bit of background about the role that you have played within the Center for Watershed Protection, but I know you've been one of those leaders on the state work group for this. So,
Sure. Yeah. So, at the Center for Watershed Protection, I'm the Pennsylvania director. So we have 4 program areas: research, stormwater and watershed consulting services, and a membership program, as well as a training program. And so I'm the only director that has a state, and I get Pennsylvania. So that makes me happy because I've loved working here throughout my entire career. So over the past several years, I've been heavily involved with the MS4 program, and as Allyson mentioned, I was a member of the work group, as well as I see a couple of my fellow work group members on this call too. And so I encourage anyone who is listening in that is familiar with these regs, when we get to those points, to chime in and also help to answer those questions. So I do think that a lot of the questions and concerns can be answered through this presentation. And if for some reason I don't actually hit on the particular question that you had, definitely bring it back up later. I took a picture of my screen. I'm very tech savvy with those questions to refer to. But yeah, if you could remind me, that would be great. I'm going to go through a background of kind of how we got here, but really quickly, because I'm assuming that everybody here has some sort of basis of the MS4 permit program. And so I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, so that we can get into really the main documents that are and the updates that have been made to these documents. So I'm not, like it was mentioned, it's a lot of information and it's overwhelming to go through. And so I tried to pick out some of the more important changes that I noted. I'm going to try to not impart my opinion on what the actual permit requirements are, whether you think it's fair or you don't think it's fair, or you think something should be incorporated. I'm going to present the information as is, and as I understand it, and kind of go through all of the different elements that you see here. And we're going to have, as Allyson mentioned, the kind of big ones that we have are the MEP Calculator, the volume management plan, and the 2028 model ordinance. So we're going to have stopping points after those 3 components to get some questions and try to make sure that we answer them before we move on to the next, because those, especially the MEP Calculator and the volume management plan, are new components to the MS4 permit, the draft MS4 permit. So a bit of the background is that the current PAG 13 general permit, so that's what DEP calls our MS4 general permit, because they have general permits for a lot of other NPDES programs. And the MS4 one just happens to be number 13. Lucky number 13. That expired March 15th, 2023. And DEP, and I don't know the exact date, which doesn't really matter at this point, but they extended that indefinitely, which basically also stated that it was until the next PAG 13 is finalized. So we're getting closer to that. They also, something to note is that concurrently, and which many of you probably been aware of, we have had a draft post-construction stormwater management manual that went through public comment period over a year ago, I think, something like that. So that's anticipated, DEP has said, to be finalized in 2026. So what we see in the draft MS4 permit is also reflective of some of the new guidance in the draft PCSM manual. And so one thing I wanted to note, which a lot of people have heard the rumors about the term best management practice as a stormwater facility or as a referenced in the MS4 permit, and quite frankly, like all the other NPDS stormwater programs for DEP will now be referred to as stormwater control measure, so SCM. So in the PCSM manual, the term SCM is used, and so throughout the draft MS4 permit, you're going to see the term SCM instead of best management practice when referring to an actual stormwater management facility or practice. And so we'll go through and talk about that. High level, as Allyson mentioned, the PAG 13 DEP assembled a work group, and that was 2 years ago now that we met. The overall work group met 8 times for like 2-hour sessions, and it went into 2023. And DEP really did take a lot of that discussion and incorporate it into this new permit. So I think, you know, from a lot of the feedback that I've been hearing lately, a lot of people are happy with the kind of outcome of this permit, because a lot of the complaints from the work group included things like, we didn't have enough time to plan last time. Everything was compressed into a small period of time. We had to do our mapping, storm sewer sheds. We had to determine what our existing pollutant loading was. We had to then propose projects to meet the 10% reduction. And we didn't have time to come up with good projects. We didn't have time to, you know, look at really truly collaborating with other our neighbors on implementation. Many people have had to go revise their pollutant reduction plans and go through public participation multiple times because of this. Also, there was no standardization of the reduction requirement calculation, so that also made it difficult to collaborate. The ultimate, I think, rumor, and now that everybody knows that the permit's out, is that the shift from sediment reduction as the focus to volume reduction as a focus, but as a means to achieve the same objective, right? So the MS4 permit is really designed to minimize pollution from urban areas. Urban areas have a lot of impervious surface. Unmanaged stormwater runoff from impervious surface creates erosion and sediment pollution of our streams into our streams. And so that's really what the focus has kind of shifted to as a means to achieve a reduction in sediment is to manage the volume from impervious, because that's really what's been impacted as a result of the urban area. And then the other thing is that there was a lot of feedback from the work group about affordability of the pollutant reduction plans. There was a massive undertaking for a lot of municipalities. Some municipalities didn't have as high of obligations. Some had a lot of obligations. You know, if your entire municipality was urban area and every single stream was impaired and you're located within the Chesapeake Bay, you know, you're looking at an incredible expense over a 5-year period of time. So, you know, how to make that fair? What is the maximum extent practicable for every municipality to implement and improve water quality? And then overall, instead of just DEP saying, yes, we promote collaborations. Well, they decided to actually incentivize collaboration, because we recognize that collaboration can really do some good things in terms of having better projects, more meaningful projects, and sometimes larger projects, and also offset impacts where we have challenges finding project locations. So there's a lot of, I could go into a lot of detail on that, but we won't right now. So key dates, Allyson mentioned, just a refresher, January 18th, 2025 was when the draft PAG 13 was posted in the PA bulletin. In March 19th is when the comments are due. As of now, in the draft permit, the notice of intent will be due for existing and new general permittees September 30th, 2026 to become effective October 1st. So individual permittees are still TBD. So this discussion is not about TMDLs. It's not about individual permittees. It's about the general permit. However, we all know that the general permit provisions tend to be incorporated into the individual permit when it's finalized. So if you do have an individual permit as opposed to a general, a lot of what you see in this general permit is probably going to become some of your requirements as well, if not all. So, with the addition of other considerations like TMDLs. So that's why it's important for you to pay attention and comment on this, even though you have an individual. So snapshot of the current MS4 program components. We have our 6 minimum control measures. We have the pollutant reduction plans for the Chesapeake Bay and locally impaired streams for sediment and nutrients, total maximum daily load requirements for stormwater discharges to streams with TMDLs for sediment and nutrients. Then we had pollutant control measures for streams that were impaired for acid mine drainage, PCBs and or pathogens. Then we have your annual report requirement. So the major changes are no more pollutant control measures. DEP has decided to suspend the pollutant control measures until so that they can process the information received during this permit cycle, and then replacing the pollutant reduction plans with volume management plans. And then the TMDL information is TBD. So moving forward, the draft permit documents are available on DEP's e-library. So that's the pathway, or you could search for the document number. I have the link at the very end of this presentation in a resources slide. So what's on the e-library are the notice of intent documents, the actual general permit, the waiver documents, a fact sheet, the volume management documents, and the 2028 model ordinance. I think some of us noticed that some of us, probably just a very few of us, noticed that when this came out, we're like, where is the MEP calculator? It's on the DEP MS4 webpage. So if you just Google PA DEP MS4, their webpage comes up first thing, and the first paragraph has the links to the MEP calculator spreadsheet and instructions, which is a big component of the notice of intent submission. So going into the notice of intent itself, they used to have TMDL and waste load allocation information on the notice of intent. That's been removed because that automatically kicks somebody into an individual permit and isn't applicable to a general permit. And then they added the volume management plan requirement, and just some administrative things associated with the volume management plan. So that's just highlighting the changes. The notice of intent checklist. What are you required to submit along with your form? What that's different, say, than years past. The biggest difference is the MEP calculator, which we'll go into in detail. For new applicants, you have to submit your stormwater management ordinance with the NOI, or if you are an existing permittee and haven't provided your latest version of your stormwater management ordinance, then they want to see that. We'll get into this a little bit later, but if you're going to become a joint or co-permittee with multiple municipalities, then you have to submit the entire NOI package for each co-applicant in addition to your own. So that is another requirement. So people ask about waivers and comparing the waiver eligibility criteria from last permit term. There's two new questions that were added. One was, does the MS4 have a stormwater management ordinance that is consistent with DEP's model, and then approve Act 160 or approved Act 167 plan? And then is the MS4 in compliance with all current permit requirements? So a I'll get into this in a little bit here too. But the one question that someone asked was, I don't know if it was asked, but there was interest in whether people qualify for waivers. When you're filling out the waiver eligibility form, DEP's instructions say that you need to use the 2020 urban area to answer these questions. However, if you had 2010 urban area in your municipality, and now as a result of the 2020 census, you no longer have urban area, they're still going to consider you a regulated MS4. However, you may now be eligible for a waiver if you meet all of the other criteria here. So I would encourage you to look into the instructions in detail if you're in that situation. So it's possible that if you're not in compliance with your current permit requirements and you want a waiver, you qualify for a waiver. Other than that, you may have to comply with what you were already required to do before you can get a waiver. It's not like everything immediately drops, or maybe they'll ask you to continue permit coverage. I think it's going to be a case by case basis, and so you'll have to look into that. As far as discharges to streams with impairments, they added some that are related to urban area or urban impacts that weren't listed before, and you'll see these later for municipalities that are going to be required to develop volume management plans. So this comprehensive list here is what will kick someone into having to develop a volume management plan, and or if you're in the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, applicability, these are like, again, a very high level. Who does the PAG 13 apply to? Existing general permits and new designated as part of the 2020 census. And then you need to submit your NOI package or waiver by September 30th, 2026. There's a long list of where the general permit doesn't apply, but these are kind of the more common criteria. And those are if you discharge to streams that are exceptional value or high quality, or if you have a waste load allocation in a TMDL approved by EPA for siltation or nutrients, then you're going to get an individual permit. There is some clarification added here. So if you might not qualify for a general permit if you've shown a lack of ability or intention to comply with your permit requirements. So if you haven't achieved your 2018 permit requirements during the time frame, it's possible that DEP may say, hey, you have to have an individual permit now because you didn't finish your current obligations. So I think that's going to be also a case by case basis, and DEP will probably come out with more guidance on that. Moving on to the minimum control measures. In the scheme of things, the changes to this is very minor, so again, not going to spend too much time. In terms of minimum control measure 1, this is all highlighted in the fact sheet, by the way, because I didn't even have time to go through and compare the permit documents side by side to pull out like minutia, and I don't think you guys want to hear minutia anyway. So minimum control measure 1 was just updated to acknowledge that social media postings qualify as education, because that has something that the language was still kind of the original language, permit language, and hadn't been updated for kind of modern standards for outreach. So that's been updated. The public involvement and participation for minimum control measure 2 was updated to include a requirement for targeted outreach to environmental justice areas. And then minimum control measure 3, illicit discharge detection and elimination. There's some interesting clarifications here. So there's always been this requirement that if there's dry weather flow, you're supposed to complete outfall field screenings every year at those outfalls. But this is clarifying that if the dry weather flow is coming from a groundwater or spring, then it's not necessary to do annual dry weather outfall field screenings. However, they're requiring semi-annual dry weather outfall field screenings for previously identified concerns until the source is eliminated, and then it can be reduced to annual. So that's a change and kind of like a clarification in guidance. And then this kind of doesn't necessarily belong under MCM3, but I'm putting it here anyway, under the list of authorized discharges, there's not any major changes. Like I know last permit cycle, the big change was that swimming pool discharges was removed from the list of authorized discharges. And the biggest change is that residential vehicle wash water is an authorized discharge. And they removed the statement that said where cleaning agents are not utilized. So people can wash their cars in their driveway with soap and it can go enter the MS4 and it's fine. I think they're just looking at that as a de minimis impact. Just as an FYI, I think there was a lot of questions as to what do homeowners do to wash their cars then, if they can't do that. So just FYI, whether you think that's a good idea or not. Next, just quickly is resulting with the MCMs. For MCMs 4 and 5, the biggest change is that they're requiring municipalities enter a memorandum of understanding with the conservation districts if you're relying on them to satisfy these requirements. So this was just kind of like optional provision before, and I know a lot of counties and municipalities do this, but I know a lot don't. And so it's not a huge, I mean, this is my perspective. This is something that I think is going to be worked out on a county level, and is also something that could possibly be coordinated with 167 efforts if it's not already in place in Lancaster County. I know most of the counties around kind of this area, I don't think they have actual MOUs with conservation districts. So minimum control measure 5, just another clarification is that you're going to be required to submit your comprehensive SCM inventory once, and then you'll only need to supplement with new SCMs constructed during the reporting period. And so you don't need to continually submit the entire list. And then there's no changes to MCM 6. So we're moving on to the MEP calculator. This is what everybody, I think, wants to understand the most. And I guess from a high level, the MEP calculator is designed to determine what your volume management objective is going to be for your volume management plan. And who it will apply to is MS4s that discharge to the Chesapeake Bay, and MS4s that discharge to streams that are impaired for all of those things. And that automatically will require you to have an MEP calculator completed and submitted with your NOI. The basis behind it is to achieve attainment of water quality standards. And the method to do that is by treating, and we'll get to what treating means in a little bit, 88% of impervious area within the census-defined urban area through stormwater control measures implemented over a 50-year period. So I'm going to just share the, this is just a screen recording because I hate sharing my screen live. But this is what the MEP calculator looks like. You have to enable macros and all of that kind of stuff. And there's instructions in the MEP calculator, instructions on how to do that. There's drop downs. All of the yellow boxes are areas where you need to complete. There's the financial socioeconomic factors. There's SEM opportunity. And then there's, finally, after adding in your collaborations, you come up with your annualized volume management objective that's automatically populated. So that bright yellow is something that is calculated for you through the DEP spreadsheet. And you'll see there's another tab at the bottom called SCM types, and I will show that later. But right now, this is breaking down the form. So the total impervious area for the MEP calculator is actually based on a combination of the 2010 plus the 2020 urban area. So that is my understanding. It's because of the fact that we are looking at the impervious impacts within the UA. And just because a population may have shrunk in one area doesn't mean that the impervious area associated with that population went away. And so, you know, you're looking at if 2010 urban area decreased in one area and that 2020 increases, you're going to look at the biggest version of that. So, I don't think that this GIS layer actually exists yet. So it's something that you either have to create, or I would recommend maybe a comment to DEP that they create that and make it publicly available for people to use. Then the other thing to note is that, and this answers one of the questions, I think, the impervious area layer that needs to be used is either impervious based off of high resolution aerial photography. Like if you have a stormwater fee and you all used, created your own impervious layer, or say Chester County has an impervious layer, that would be acceptable to use in this situation. Or you can use the National Land Cover data set, or if you're in the Chesapeake Bay, you can use the Chesapeake Conservancy's land cover. So there's additional instructions in the MEP calculator on how to interpret like the NLCD. And the Chesapeake Conservancy, I think they say that you need to use impervious and tree cover over impervious included into the impervious treated. So another thing to note is that there's no parsing of impervious areas other than if you have combined sewer system areas and or properties owned by other MS4s, like county owned and state owned MS4s. So there's going to be questions about that probably, because it's like, well, we have a prison in our municipality. Don't know if that prison, the state has an MS4 permit that prison falls into or something like that. So there might be some clarification needed by DEP on that one. So then once you put in your impervious area, and then we'll get to this impervious area treated by stormwater control measures in a little bit. That's a whole different tab. You put your total impervious area within your urban area in here. You'll get your initial annualized volume management objective. And this is prior to applying the feasibility index and collaboration credits. So this is kind of like your baseline if you don't fill out the rest of the form, which I would encourage you to fill out the rest of the form. This is something that I'm not going to go into detail, but when you look here, it says view chart. There is a chart in the background that is where DEP is pulling this information from. And there's a full explanation on how these numbers are determined, and it's in the MEP calculator instructions. This is the lookup table, so you can see where you would be with your total impervious within the UA and an impervious treated. Say you had 0 to 5% and you're over 2,000 acres impervious, you're going to have 50,000 cubic feet per year would be your annualized volume management objective, which is, as you can see, the maximum. So that's just the background if you were curious, but this is like going to be automatically populated for you here. Going on to the SCM inventory. So I mentioned here that, there's this little line that says impervious area treated. So there's a couple questions. It's like, okay, so what does treated mean? Treated means by stormwater control measures that reduce or manage the 1-inch runoff volume by infiltration and or evapotranspiration and managed release concept, with a few exceptions. So it says complete the SCM inventory. So this is where that second tab in the spreadsheet shows the SCM types. And once you check off these boxes for the different SCM types, additional tabs appear. It's magical. So I just want to say, before moving on, populating this inventory of stormwater control measures it will establish a baseline of impervious treated within your urban area that you can build upon in subsequent permit terms. And it will also reduce your annualized volume management objective. So, you know, the more that you show that you're already treating your impervious, you're reducing your annual your baseline basically. So it is favorable to do this. Okay, I'm going to apologize right now for the amount of words on the next slide, but I don't know what else to do at this point. So some things to note that aren't like about like specific stormwater control measures that don't qualify on the inventory. And so right now on the inventory, street sweeping and inlet cleaning, like sediment removal activities, do not qualify to be populated because it's not treating impervious. If you've done retrofits of rate control basins to a wet pond or like a dry extended detention basin, it doesn't have an infiltration component to it. They're saying that you can credit those retrofits, but only 50% of the impervious treated. Vegetated swales don't qualify as a stormwater control measure unless it has on this inventory, unless it has check dams to promote infiltration. Soil amendments don't qualify unless a certified soil scientist can verify through testing that there's a volume management benefit. Note that stream restoration with a floodplain restoration component does qualify. Stream restoration without a floodplain restoration component only qualifies if it's above and beyond what you were required to do for the 2018 PRP. So other tidbits is that these stormwater control measures to be put in the inventory can be constructed of any time, any size project, regardless of regulatory purpose, because you're just looking at this overall goal of treating, managing 88% of untreated impervious. The SCMs must capture and manage at least 1 inch of runoff. All PCSMs for stormwater control measures for compliance 102 can be assumed to meet this criterion and like be populated in here. And then if there's no info available in the design of the SCM, the MS4 may make observations to determine whether it qualifies. So I'm going to show you the level of information that's needed to populate the stormwater control measure inventory. It's a lot. And so it's possible that you might not have design plans or any information on the design. And so DEP is saying that you can make observations about the stormwater control measure to determine whether it qualifies and populate this inventory. Then they're also saying that it must have been inspected within the past 2 years and considered functional. Okay, so this is what this tab looks like. And as you can see, when you check off the boxes, the different tabs appear. When you click on floodplain restoration, basically everything that's that light yellow color you have to populate. And so you need to provide some detail. For stream restoration, same kind of thing. They're going to give you an impervious treated equivalency to the sediment overage. For basin retrofits, you need things like SEM surface area, depth to lowest orifice, stormwater control measure storage volume, and things like that. And then so similar for volume management, SEM's surface area, lowest orifice, storage volume, and then you'll get your impervious treated. So it's not just moving your BMP inventory from MCM5 over because you don't have all that information. It's going to take some time to do this in the scheme of things. It's what the ultimate goal is, so it's worth it to do. It's just something that to be advised, it's going to take time. Going down the MEP calculator spreadsheet to step 2. This is financial socioeconomic factors. People are wondering where to get this information. I believe DEP provides resources to where to find this information in the MEP calculator instructions. So, and if anyone needs clarity on where to find them, then that should be a comment during this public comment period. If it's unclear, you know, or the links are broken or something like that. So that's something to note. And generally speaking, the more financially challenged a municipality is, the kind of lower their volume management objective will end up becoming as a result of populating this. Doesn't mean that they are absolved of never doing these, meeting the overall volume management objective. It's just going to kind of kick the can down the road, expands the implementation time period longer. And then the final section in the MEP Calculator spreadsheet is the stormwater control measures opportunities. And so there was a lot of comments during the work group about, like, okay, there's just nowhere to put like best management practices. We have nowhere to put anything. What do we do? And so, DEP heard that, and they're trying to consider that, and basically, looking at the percent of impervious area that's publicly owned. So if you own it, then that's looked at as higher opportunity. And so it's not going to decrease your VMO. I don't know that it's going to increase it, but it's not going to decrease your volume management objective. So the percent of public impervious that is untreated, this is looking at the higher the percent, the lower the estimated opportunity, decreasing the VMO. I believe I interpreted that properly. I'm not really sure. You guys need to get in there and fiddle with the numbers. And then localized flooding problem in the municipality. That's a yes or no question. If you populate yes, it lowers your volume management objective, but you need to provide documentation. And then if this is basically the number of development or redevelopment projects per year is a drop down, and it's a range. And so they're basically saying the higher the percent, the higher the estimated opportunity, it's not going to decrease your volume management objective. I don't know that it's going to increase it. And then same thing with the PCSM. If you have an ordinance that requires stormwater management for less than an acre of earth disturbance. I see people like popping questions in here, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to completely answer for you, but step 3 is determine the final maximum extent practicable. So going back to that annualized volume management objective baseline at the top, after you apply all of these different criteria in the feasibility index, you're getting to this final step. And this is where they ask about collaboration. So I will say the number of additional MS4s collaborating in a volume management plan. So you get 1% credit per partner up to 50%. So that will reduce your volume management objective by that percentage. And then if you are, this is collaborating on a volume management plan. If you are also co-permittees, then you get an additional 10% credit. And then you'll get your final annualized volume management objective, which, going back to that lookup chart, is a minimum for everybody of 1,000 cubic feet per year and a maximum of 50,000 cubic feet per year. So you're not going to have anything lower or less than that. Nobody's going to get off like completely like with zero volume management objective. And so finally, your volume management objective for the 2026 permit term is the annualized volume management objective times 2. So that says that right there. So then you're going to be needing to submit a volume management plan by September 30th, 2028. And then complete your projects to address that volume management objective for the permit term by September 30th, 2031. So that's where we're pausing on the MEP calculator.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Beth. That is extremely, extremely helpful, and a lot of numbers and a lot of new acronyms. Thank you for your digging into things. I'm going to open it up for questions. There were a couple that came in the chat, but also thank you for those of you who have been providing some answers and guidance in the chat along the way. So I'll open it here for just a few minutes if there are questions people want to ask verbally, or if you want to continue to use the chat, that's fine. There are two more sections in today's presentation, so we're only asking about the MEP calculator at the moment.
I hope it's not completely overwhelming, or it's less overwhelming than looking at the permit documents.
Hey, Beth.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ben Weber here.
Hey, Ben.
Question about the collaboration 1% per municipality. Do you have any sense of the reasoning? Clearly, it's not an engineering, it's more of a political issue to try and encourage us to work together. But can you shed any light from the work group as to how that was arrived at?
Well, in terms of the actual percent, like that, the work group had nothing to do with the percent. The feedback that the work group gave was that we want to see everybody wanted to see collaboration facilitated, or let a pathway to collaboration, right? And so I think that DP did this as a way to break down some barriers in collaboration, just because there's been a lot of good success stories. There's a lot of benefits to collaborating from a cost effectiveness standpoint, from getting ideal project locations in the ground. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we heard feedback on, was that there's some municipalities that just have nowhere to put projects, and so or they might have a place to put a project, but it makes absolutely no sense there. So in terms of like the percent benefit that is given, I mean, I can't say that it's political in that sense. I think the objective is really to get better projects in the right locations. And so if you have concerns about that not being the ultimate outcome, then that would be a good comment, because just like anything, say, I don't want to talk about the last permit term very much, but like there's always unintended consequences as a result of some of this guidance, and that we can't see until it pans out. So in terms of the numbers, some of the numbers in here, and how they decided to weight some of these factors, I think they just played with it. I don't really know, like that's a comment. Ask them how they came up with these things. If you don't think, why is this weighted heavier than this? Or why are they giving such much, credit for collaboration? Then, if you, that should be something that, you vocalize during that time.
Will do. Thank you.
Yep.
Any
Hey,
other
this is
questions? Yeah.
Adam Stern at the district, Lancaster County. Two things. One, Mark from county planning highlighted that they have a GIS layer that may be usable for the impervious question, but there was some follow up about whether it would be accepted or not. I think that's great clarification to get on how that layer is generated, whether it fits with DEP's guidelines or not. And the other one I just wanted to, Beth mentioned the question about, or the requirement of written agreement or MOU with the county. We do have an MOU that we offer to municipalities to sign on. That goes with a number of our programs. And so we are currently in the process of finalizing a new updated version of that, hoping to have it out this spring. But if you have questions about that, or you're not sure if your municipality has signed on to the most recent one, you can always get in touch with me. I can check our records, and if not, get you our most recent one so that you can make sure that you have that in line for that requirement.
That's good to know. And I would also recommend that I don't know what that will look like, and it may be a moot point, but since there is a new model ordinance and there's going to be a new countywide model ordinance, to making sure that the MOU is consistent with whatever is in the municipal ordinances, as well, or vice versa. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and that's on my list to circle back here today and look at. But yes, ours, I think, may be broad enough that it doesn't necessarily contradict any of those. But yeah,
okay.
certainly, and we're always looking for feedback on those. If you or anyone in your office at any of your municipalities is reading that MOU and something's not making sense, let's chat.
That sounds good. I was thinking more along the lines of like thresholds of like impervious and or earth disturbance of like who's reviewing what and that kind of thing.
Oh, got you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But anyway,
Okay, understood.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody
Any
else?
other
Thanks, Adam. That was
questions?
good.
Yeah, any other questions people want to ask verbally?
Another question I had, Ben Weber here again, is relative to the definition of impervious areas. Is it correct that bodies of water, such as the Conestoga River, which is explicitly owned by DEP, the Commonwealth, but is within our municipality, is it correct that that is considered an impervious area that we have to include in our volume management objective?
I'm going to say for volume management or the volume management objective, my impression is that would be a no. But for the definition of impervious in the stormwater ordinance, you saw that, right? Is that where you're getting it from? Because
Yes, it is.
that would be a yes there. So, but yeah, I mean, when you look at the guidance for what the impervious layers are, it says to use the Chesapeake Conservancy layer that designates the land cover as impervious or tree cover over impervious. So that wouldn't include water bodies. And same thing with the USDA or the NLCD. And then any other impervious that's generated from high resolution ortho imagery, that's gonna just be your traditional surfaces. So I don't believe that it would be considered that as part of your volume management objective. So,
Okay,
but if
thank
you
you.
want to clarify, I mean, that again, clarify, I think that would be a good public comment. Because it's like, why are you defining it this way in one location and not the other? So
Yeah,
That's
I like consistency. Thanks.
Beth, that's a great point to continue diving into what this looks like for you and your municipality, for each of you attending today. Beth, thanks for the walkthrough. I know that you've got more content to share with us about a volume management plan. And if people have more questions, I know there were some others in the chat. We'll keep track of those and we'll get them answered as best we can, but also we'll probably bring them back for our listening session that we'll have soon after this. Thanks, Beth. Next topic.
yeah, thanks, Allison. So volume management plan, I think it'll go a little bit. I don't want to say this is a little bit further down the road. So, but there's some things to consider now, when, as you're starting to put together MEP calculator once the draft is finalized, or because we need to comment on the volume management plan, even though it is further down the road. So, the volume management plan is not going to be due to DEP but till September 30th, 2028. So there's 2 years between the NOI submission and the plan development. And it's not going to be this like 100-page pollutant reduction plan that's required. There's specific template that DP has put out. That's basically the form is 3 pages, but you'll see adding other things to it. If you're going to be collaborating with other municipalities, you have to list them as an attachment and also their permit term volume management objective. The other thing is the third form is a stormwater control measure identification sheet that provides details about every stormwater control measure that's proposed to meet your volume management objective. And so this is a lot of detailed information. I haven't reviewed this in detail to make sure that everything that's on here is also I think, let me just say here, eventually everything that you implement as part of your volume management plan, the next permit term, if it's allowable, it's going to be going on to your SCM inventory to show your progress in treating that 88% of untreated impervious. And so we want to make sure there's consistency between those things, so that this is the time to point that out to DEP, like the consistency between the sheet as well as the MEP calculator SCM type sheet. I should also note, in terms of 102, that it would be really helpful if the notice of termination forms also included the information that's required in the stormwater control measure inventory to be populated in the MEP calculator. So I don't know if that's on DEP's radar, but something to think about. So a couple things to point out here. There's some additional credits that DEP is offering during the volume management plan period. It's so this is later. So if you're implementing a stormwater control measure that's within an environmental justice area, you can add 10% volume management credit to that particular SCM. And then if you can document that stormwater control measure is helping to alleviate flooding, then you can also add another 10% volume management credit. I will say that I believe that this comes from the fact that there's concern with municipalities collaborating together. Projects are going to end up in kind of rural areas maybe that have more space, and municipalities that are more dense in urban development may not be incentive to put stormwater control measures there or green infrastructure there. But everybody wants to have green infrastructure in their community. And so to make sure that everybody's has an opportunity for green infrastructure, incentivizing that to put it in environmental justice areas, I think maybe partly where that came from. Again, that's just my opinion. I don't know that as perspective from the work group. And then SCMs that help to alleviate local flooding. There was a lot of disconnect between where projects were being put in last permit period and where people in the community and elected officials were seeing flooding problems. And they're like, why are we doing a stormwater project over here when we have flooding over here? And so I think that also is kind of where this alleviate local flooding credit is coming from. So things that are required attachments as part of the SCM identification sheet. This is not only what's required, but it's so it's listed in the volume management plan instructions, but this is pretty big. So as part of your volume management plan, you need to provide preliminary design plan, 30 to 50% complete design plans as for all the stormwater control measures that you're proposing in your volume management plan in your submission. So that's a lot of work. And then, well, depending on what your obligation is, an O&M plan's required to be attached. And then there's a volume management plan spreadsheet that will be required, but it's still under development by DEP. So what types of stormwater control measures can we do? And what about them? So they have to have a volume management component for the most part. We'll get into that. They generally have to be consistent with the draft post-construction stormwater management manual. As part of the volume management plan, SCMs that were installed to satisfy regulatory requirements may not count unless it's above and beyond what those regulatory requirements were. So you can count them in your SCM inventory as part of the MEP calculator because you're offsetting the impervious that it's treating, but you can't claim credit for it to achieve your volume management objective. So, you can only claim credit for it as a municipality if it's above and beyond what Chapter 102 is, or 105 if it's, say, like a mitigation project, like a floodplain restoration as part of mitigation. And then the drainage area must have at least 20% impervious surface that it's treating within this stormwater control measure. Let's see here. This little note right here is basically to say that if you propose more than what's required in your volume management plan and you don't construct it, you don't have to revise your volume management plan. I think DEP maybe is trying to streamline that process to not have to go back and forth and revise it over and over again. And you're not on the hook for putting it in the ground. And then excess volume management credit. So they're just saying this right in the permit document, which is a question that was never answered the last permit term, is that any overages in this permit term will be creditable in the following term when they are added to the inventory for that MEP calculator spreadsheet, this SCM type. So that's just kind of like some little blips. So stormwater control measures can be located anywhere within a municipal boundary, not just within the UA, not within a particular watershed, This is excluding TMDLs, by the way. Doesn't have to be in a paired watershed. It can be located anywhere within municipal boundary. Okay. What are the types? These are the types that are listed in the volume management plan instructions, and they're verbatim really with the volume management SCMs in the post-construction stormwater management manual. Quite honestly, these are very similar to BMPs that are in the 2006 BMP manual. The only difference is that for the most part, the standards have changed, you know, but like the types are the same. But they've added MRC, managed release concept, into the PCSM manual because it was just a kind of a standalone document for years. So managed release concepts are added into here. Okay. Next, there are some allowable exceptions to allow for some practices that don't have a volume management component to it. And so this is an example. They're gonna be allowing crediting for street sweeping and inlet cleaning, 1 cubic foot per dry ton of sediment collected up to 1,000 cubic feet. So that's basically giving you a sediment to volume equivalency for doing these sediment removal activities. Stream restoration without a floodplain restoration component is getting a similar credit, 1 cubic foot per linear foot of stabilized channel up to 1,000 cubic feet max. So there's no volume component to the stream restoration. It's more of like a stream bank stabilization, natural channel design with no floodplain component. It also must meet minimum qualifying conditions. Doesn't really say that what that is in the instructions. So I said I want to give my opinion, but I think there needs to be more clarity there. But then it says, and constructed to meet standards of priority levels 1, 2, and 3 in EPA's natural channel design review checklist. And then tree plantings are going to be given 3 to 6 cubic feet per new tree as listed below. So one thing to note is that these stormwater control measures that don't provide a volume management benefit are not going to decrease a permittee's volume management objective in future permit terms. So you're not allowed to, like, you can't add these to your SCM inventory to show that progress towards treating the 88% because they're just removing sediment. So that's just something to note. And it just also says may not be authorized in subsequent general permits. So they're really trying to disincentivize these types of practices. So if you feel some kind of way about that, this is the time to comment about it. And then, of course, anything that's not listed here, DEP said is subject to review. And they just recommend that you coordinate in advance. And I think I'm coming to the close here and I'm running out of time. So just want to mention collaboration. In the volume management plan, they're allowing for collaboration on a HUC 12 watershed level or county level. Intergovernmental agreements are required. Individual permittees may participate, but you have to apply to DEP to get your permit timeline to jive with the general permittees. And then in addition, collaborating municipalities, and this is generally for county level, because if you're collaborating on a watershed level, it's got to be located within the watershed. SCMs may be located anywhere within the boundaries within the collaborating municipalities, regardless of watershed. So that's all I have on the volume management plan. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Beth, it's Hutelmyer.
Hey.
Could you just repeat what you'd said about aligning, if you're looking at collaboration, aligning your timeline with general permittees? Specifically, that's for individual permittees who may want to collaborate. Could you speak a little more on that?
Yeah, so it says individual permittees in the general permit, or I'm sorry, it's in the volume management plan instructions. It says individual permittees may choose to collaborate with general permittees, but they need to submit an application to DEP so that their permit timeline will be the same as the general permits that they're collaborating with. So it doesn't really have any more detail than that I saw at this point. That could possibly be somewhere where we need more information too, because does that just mean that you just pull out like the individual permit application form from, from the e-library and fill that out, and then, there's not really a lot of information on like, what they need as part of that or anything like that. So
Presumably that would only apply to future individual permits. I mean, do you foresee any wiggle room for existing
it
municipalities
sounded,
with current individual permits to sort of hop on the new bandwagon?
I mean, it sounded like they were talking about existing and individual permits. That's something that could probably need clarity, but I feel like there is opportunity, but there's still not a lot of information from DEP on individual permit timelines, like existing individual permit timelines, and also obviously the TMDL stuff. But I think that could be a good, like that line in the volume management plan instructions could be a good mechanism to get some of these questions answered now, as opposed to waiting for guidance on the individual permit to come out, if that makes any sense.
Hey, Beth, it's Ben Weber. The impervious area reduction, if we opt to go that way, what would be the ratio of square feet of impervious area removed versus cubic feet per year that's calculated in our volume management objective?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head.
All right.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. Honestly, I haven't looked into impervious, like how to quantify the credit for impervious removal in detail yet. So, but it may be that if that is something that interests you, that the stormwater control measure form that we saw earlier, where is it? This one, the identification sheet. This may need to be modified to better capture the information from that SCM type impervious removal. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey Beth, Angie Brackbill, with the city. Real quick, do you have any feel for why, so for the allowable exceptions, specifically trees, do you have any feel or reasoning as why that like trees are being decentivized? Like, what's the reason behind that? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I have no idea. Because trees actually, they meet the goal of if in terms of evapotranspiration, like it's almost like they shouldn't, like evapotranspiration. I mean, they might not meet like the 1 inch minimum criteria of tree, managing the 1 inch runoff, but it's not like their purpose is removing sediment. They are removing, water from the system, managing volume. It's on a small scale, you know what I mean? But they are. So, I did, when I was looking at that, I did feel like it was out of place, like, like, I'm not sure where they put it, but I think that that's a valid thing to point out.
Thanks.
Beth, there's a couple of the questions in the chat. I'm going to recommend that we hold those or answer them as best we can in follow-up conversations. Questions about the 102 and 105, as well as removal of existing dams. I know that you've got a little bit of material to share with us about the model ordinance, because this public comment period time is when we can ask questions or push back on that component of this. So I want to make sure you have time to share that with us. If we have time at the very end, which we're coming up on quickly, we'll answer some of these questions, but know that we will get those answered for you in some follow-up format. So.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah. And yeah, I'm doing my best to compress this while
you're
still
awesome.
providing a decent amount of information for you. And I'm going to be honest, I start running out of steam once I get to the model ordinance, as much as I can nerd out about it, I do run out of steam. So I haven't gotten into it in depth. I actually did help to comment on the model ordinance as part of that work group. So I had an idea of what was to come, some of the high level stuff. I just took out some things that I thought were interesting. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things in there that you may be interested in commenting on. So I do encourage you in your free time, you know, on the weekend, relaxing with your family, reading the model ordinance. The biggest thing to note is that there are substantive changes to it because the 2020 model ordinance was 24 pages, the 2028 is 45. And so, you know, it was easy to look at like the 2022 versus the 2012 and find very minimal, you know, it was easy to find the changes. Let's put it this way. There's a lot more you know, there's new sections added, restructuring, things like that. And so it's definitely a good idea to look at it. I wanted to also say that since the county is looking at a countywide 167 stormwater management plan, and that will include a countywide stormwater management ordinance that will need to be consistent with state MS4 guidelines, that, you know, whatever's in here is the minimum, you know, and so that will need to be incorporated into the countywide model, and that will affect everybody. So, you know, the other thing is that if you're looking at this to be more strengthened, it could help, you know, garner support on the 167 side if there's more stringent requirements in here where you can just more easily incorporate that on the 167 ordinance. So, you know, look at it, high level, added ENS plan requirements. So ENS has kind of been like absent from the stormwater management ordinances. It's been stuck in this weird world of grading ordinances. And I don't know, some municipalities have different sections. So I think that's a good thing, although it means that when you're moving into your stormwater management ordinance, and you're also having to make modifications to other part of your township code or your municipal code. So you're going to have to look at that grading ordinance and be like, okay, can I just get rid of this completely? Or am I going to have to merge some of the things that DEP is not putting into their ENS plan requirements into, you know, into the stormwater management ordinance? It's going to force people to restructure a bit. I think the restructuring makes sense. But anyway, again, I said I wouldn't give my opinion. I did. So the main updates, a lot of it is for consistency with the draft post-construction stormwater management manual. So a big hunk of what's in there is doing that. They've added definitions, modified some definitions. Some of the major ones would be evapotranspiration, managed release concepts, stormwater control measure. Best management practice is still in there because you know, there's going to be some remnant language that we need to retain on the local level to make this crossover. But they did add stormwater control measure. I thought this was interesting. I caught this really quick. They modified the definition of impervious surface to address pools and decks, which are always two like kind of controversial things to interpret. So they say pools are impervious and decks are not impervious if there's impervious surface underneath, just FYI. They added an easements article that wasn't there before and included more information on discharges to adjacent properties. And that basically that discharges to adjacent properties requirement is consistent with DEP's guidance right now. They have a guidance document on that, what they want to see for stormwater discharges onto adjacent properties as a result of what is regulated under the ordinance. And then another thing I just picked up really quick because it's one of my pet like things that I pay attention to is the post-construction BMP inspection frequencies. I said this like thousands of times over the last, like, I don't know how many years. The frequency of inspection that was required for BMPs was once a year for 5 years, once every 3 years thereafter. And then there was a storm frequency required. It was like once after every 10-year. You know, Kate Hutelmyer probably remember better than me. But that's gone now. Like the specific frequencies is completely gone. And it basically just says you need to inspect the BMPs per the frequencies identified in the O&M plan, so that they function properly. I think it's much more practical. So it's just it's a big change in terms of you know, what was required before and had been required. So I'm not going to be able to really help you with too many detailed questions on this, but if anybody has any general questions.
Thanks, Beth. I think pulling out those highlighted bullet points that you did is super helpful. Thank you for calling those out and notices. I mean, even just going from 25 to 45, is that what you said? Whew, okay. But we do have a couple other avenues to work on this. This is our time to ask questions, put comments in the public comment period about the ordinance. However, we know that that is further down the road for implementation of, but it is also an element of that Act 167. So there is a link in the chat for you. The Act 167 work is happening alongside, kind of aligned with at the same time as this MS4 work. There's going to be a lot of crossover points. So there's a survey link for you to add your flood data, to add places on a map. We want to hear from you about how the Act 167 can be a tool. The model ordinance is part of that. I know there's a couple other questions in the chat. So Beth, we'll give it just 2 or 3 minutes for open questions, and then we've got a wrap up, like things that I want to make sure the group hears. So Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm not necessarily an MS4 expert, mostly from the ag sector here with Team Ag. We consult farms on conservation projects, but in the past, it seemed like some MS4 communities were trying to coordinate more with ag landowners, whether that was on kind of a major structural project like, you know, a stream restoration, or in some cases, maybe trying to work with them on their soil health to reduce you know, flows from that farm or that sort of thing. I wasn't necessarily involved in detail on those, you know, partnerships, but I'm just curious if ag is still going to play a role, if there's an opportunity for MS4s to coordinate with farmers, particularly on that volume piece. I think there's a lot of opportunity to work with farmers to improve their soil health and capture that flow before it really makes it off the farm in the watersheds that these folks need to focus on.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all about impervious, like treating an impervious surface. So if it's possible, you could partner with an ag property if you're treating impervious upstream, maybe, you know, like a floodplain restoration project on an ag property. Riparian buffers, I think, was still on the list of SCMs that provided a volume management component. So that's still an opportunity. But that being said, like conservation practices, just based on the information provided here, but conservation practices like no-till and contour farming and like you know, that type of soil management doesn't appear to be like creditable towards MS4. If it once was, and I know some people were working on things like that. I think Kara had a couple of good examples of that too. So yeah, so as of now, that's something that if it would be good to comment on if you feel like conservation practices belong in, you know, in some sort of crediting in this permit, you know, this is the time to comment.
Hey Beth, it's Sanaa. I just wanted to add in, I mean, just from the last permit round, I mean, we've been trying to get an ag BMP as part of Honeybrook Township's Honeybrook Township and Honeybrook Boroughs pollution reduction plan to get them credit, but it was a matter of what's in the conservation plan, the approved conservation plan for the farm, and you have to basically go above and beyond what's in the conservation plan to get that credit.
Yep. Yeah, and I don't know that that would even count in this current permit term, you know, like going above and beyond that. I mean, if it has a volume management component, I guess. Yeah, but that, you know, if it was just, you know, something that's not listed in this permit, then it would be something to comment on for sure. Thanks, Una.
Hi, Allison. This question's kind of for you and Alex. This is Terry Martin from Carnarvon. My question is, do you anticipate the follow-up meeting, the in-person follow-up meeting being prior to the close of the comment period?
Thanks, Terry. We do, yes. So I'm going to use that as the transition to our kind of wrap-up statements here. A huge, huge thank you to Beth for your expertise and details and running through some things with us in a rapid fire format. But wow, thank you for your research.
Sorry.
And oh gosh, no. I'm so appreciative. I know you have other places that you're hoping to share the same kind of information, but this is one of the first. So you guys on today's session are one of the first to hear this kind of synopsis. So thank you, Beth, for all that you have done to prepare and share with us. Terry, we do want to make sure that there is a time for conversation and that what comes out of that is available for the public comment period. So with that in mind, keep your eyes open on your email and social media for that event. We're looking at the first week of March, maybe the second week, but we'll see what the snow brings us and the ice. So yes, there will be more information coming out about that session. Keep track of your questions and comments. So you'll get something from us about a place to submit them, but places like that event will be another time to do that. Keep track of them though, and keep building your list. Terry, I'm going to put you and Ben on the spot, though, that today's attendees may also hear from you, Terry, and Ben directly, because those two guys are serving as a municipal liaison for the Lancaster Clean Water Partners this winter and a little bit of the spring. So if you want to have a one-on-one conversation and kind of pick through some things, ask more questions, just put it in conversation style, those two gentlemen are available. They can go get coffee with you. They can have that type of more peer-to-peer conversation. So Terry and Ben are available for some of that. Also, the Stormwater Action Team will be meeting this spring, and that's a place that you can come together with other experts to continue the conversation. We've done BMP Lunch and Learns last year that were really popular. This year, we do plan to host those in the field a little bit later in the spring when it's a little bit warmer, but we want to customize them for the practices that Beth highlighted that are really good for this new permit coming up. Don't forget, we still all have to continue our current permit. And so there are practices that are really good to see and the maintenance components of those. So we will try to customize that BMP Lunch and Learn to fit where you are now, but also this new information and how to best plan. So some more details and calendar invites coming out soon for those best management practice learning tours and lunch and learns. Also going to encourage you to watch this, like we'll send the link for this, get you the slides, but also there is a video on DEP's Clean Water Academy. So if you want to hear anything else directly from DEP, you can watch that one. There's a lot of ways to continue learning. And also ways to continue staying engaged. We talked about the Act 167. So that Watershed Planning Advisory Committee, I think I'm getting that right. That meeting will be happening later this spring. Thank you for those who participated last week in that engagement session, and meeting number 3 info will be coming out shortly. Like I mentioned, there's a survey that you can fill in with your specific locations now, and that's super helpful to make sure that that tool, like what we end up with for phase 1 of Act 167, is the most relevant, is the most accurate. So thank you for the team that's been leading that. And also this collaborative effort, this group that is the Lancaster Clean Water Partners, a network of people doing this work. We have a common agenda, which is a tool we all agreed to in 2018, and it is also going through a revision with things like a new permit, with things like big changes in growth and the importance of everyone working together. We see that word collaboration showing up in so many places. The common agenda is something that we all want to work on together to update as well. So there are some times for you all to participate in that. There are ways that our board of trustees, that our staff, that our action team co-leads are working on that to really strengthen it, but we would love to have your perspectives and lots of different types of voices involved. So listening sessions for the common agenda are also posted. They were out in our newsletter last week, and we'll include links for those to share after today's session. So lots of ways for you to keep participating, to keep up to date. And we just are so appreciative of your participation today, and to continue asking questions, to continue saying, here's what we need, DEP, this is the information they gave. DEP, this is what our feedback is. So use things like a public comment period when, because we can. So thank you so much for your participation today. We're 2 minutes past, my apologies. But Beth, thank you again. Super, super helpful. Very grateful for your leadership and guidance today.
Thanks, Allison. I just wanted to quickly mention in the chat too, and I neglected to mention it earlier about the DEP presentation that was put together. It's a higher level summary, but it might be good for people to refer to that and share that as well, especially for those that aren't going to get into the technical elements of it. So that's also linked on the screen. Thanks.
Thank you all. We'll send you some follow-up links after today's session. Be safe.